Amy, I was in the 8th grade when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. You know, it might have been the summer between the 7th and 8th grades. I'm not exactly sure because it was right at the beginning of the school year, I think. Okay. I was old enough to appreciate some of what was going on in the world anyway. And I remember President Bush creating this international coalition, kick Saddam out of Kuwait. But mostly what I remember is the adults around me who kept talking about how the media was keeping the world informed of all these events in the Middle East. They all remembered Vietnam, when information didn't become available for weeks or maybe months after an event occurred. But in the Gulf conflict, the political and military leaders were conducting regular press briefings. And there was one leader that always stood out from all the others. It was General Colin Powell, who was then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was the youngest person and the first African-American person or first person of African descent to hold that position. And often he would be the only person of color on stage and the only person in uniform at these regular Gulf War press briefings. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. And it is interesting to me, the things that kind of stick in our minds, you know, those images, those things. Media has such a powerful impact. And you're right. A lot of the things in history we didn't find out about until much later. For example, during World War I, the 369th Infantry Regiment, known as the Harlem Hellfighters, served on the front lines in France for 6 months, longer than any other American unit in the war. And even though they had received less training, this African-American unit didn't lose any prisoners or territory to the enemy, which is amazing. And France awarded the entire unit the Croix de Guerre, that country's highest military honor, and 171 members of the regiment were awarded the Legion of Merit. So again, that piece of history many times isn't always highlighted in our history books or in our stories.
Right, it's not. But so many great stories of African-American leadership do intersect with the stories of the military. So to talk about that, we'd like to welcome J.P. Miller, a Desert Storm veteran and the author of many books for young readers. J.P.'s books are filled with African-American characters and culture. And we also have Vanessa Molden, Museum Operations and Education Manager at the African Military History Museum. Welcome, JP and Vanessa.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
Thank you. Well, you both have personal stories and reasons that you got involved in this. So in just 60 seconds each, would you mind sharing the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are? We'd like to start with you, JP.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is JP Miller, and I am a children's author. And one of the things that I want to focus on is in my writing is little known events and people in African American history. And the military is one of those areas where we don't share as much information about our military men and women, the heroes that are there. So I am glad to be with you today to discuss that. And in my writing careers in the U.S. military, something to help young people out as they make that decision to enter the military.
You've written some really good books, and I look forward to talking more about them. Vanessa, would you tell us the Cliff Notes version of your story?
Well, I have been in education in some shape, form, or fashion of my entire professional career. I began work here at the Military History Museum in 2018. And I have just always had a passion for knowledge and education, and then exposing that education and knowledge to others. So, and that's what we do. We here at the African American Military History Museum, we want to celebrate and honor and preserve the service and sacrifice of African Americans who have served our nation. A lot of times, as we've mentioned here already, those stories goes untold.
All right, Amy, this is going to be good because we're going to hear lots of good stories.
And, you know, that's our favorite thing. And I think, Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the museum in a former USO building?
Yes, it is. And it was built in 1942 for African-American soldiers who was training at Camp Shelby preparing to go to World War II.
Yeah.
are proud to say that it is the only USO that was built for African Americans during that time frame in public use today.
I don't know why, but that for some reason, a building that has housed that much history and to be used for this purpose, I think is just a double winner. I love it. It's awesome. All right. So we normally start our episodes with, at least we have for the last couple seasons, with a list of definitions. But tonight we're going to do it differently. And so what I would love to know, first of all, I'm going to pick on you first, Vanessa. Would you please help us understand the role that African American soldiers have played during some of the historical conflicts in the U.S.? And, maybe just go back as far as you'd like to, kind of thinking Revolutionary War, but then the highlight reels from that point on.
Okay, well, starting with the American Revolution, I can say I remember going to, in my history class, I do remember learning about Crispus Attucks. And that's probably one of the most well-known African Americans who contributed during the American Revolution. But one probably of a lesser known is Peter Salem, who fought during the American Revolution. He was from Massachusetts, and he played a significant role in that. He's actually credited for mortally killing the British Major John Pitram. And a lot of people don't know. And there's actually a photograph that depicts that is in the Museum of Arts in Boston, Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And there's also a monument in Framingham, Massachusetts.
Okay.
So, and then the Buffalo Soldiers, that most people do know about the Buffalo Soldiers who helped develop the Western frontier. But one particular Buffalo Soldier that people may not be aware of is Cathay Williams. And she was the first female to serve in our Army. And the neat story about her is because back then, women were not allowed to serve in our armed forces. But I always say that, where there's a woman, there is a way. We tend to, if we want to do something, we're going to find out a way to do it. And so she wanted to serve because she saw that as a better way of life for her. And so she was very creative. She dressed herself as a male and then transposed her first and last name, and she became William Cathay. And so she served in the Army for about 2 years. And then she, during a medical examination, they discovered that she was a female and they kicked her out.
Wow.
And then we can move on into the World War I, which you have mentioned, the Harlem Hellfighters. And one in particular, the group is well known, but one particular Harlem Hellfighter, two very briefly. James Reese Europe, he is actually credited for introducing the French to American jazz because they played in France while they were over there. And then Henry Lincoln Johnson, who actually fought off a German detachment of soldiers, saved his life and fellow soldiers, and while sustaining 21 wounds, came back to America and basically was forgotten about. Mm-hmm. And later on, he actually received his medals that he was due, but it was substantially much later. And he actually, President Barack Obama actually was the president that awarded the Medal of Honor to him. And like I said, this happened in World War I, and it took that many years before he was recognized. And a lot of African Americans who have served in our armed forces have been forgotten about. Mm. And as we move on to World War II, I would like to mention Ruth Bailey Earl, who is a Hattiesburg native. She was the first African-American female to enlist from Hattiesburg. And her story is that she was a nurse. And so she went over to fight. And because of the time that we were living in, the white soldier did not feel it appropriate for a Black female to give care to them. And so they sent her over to give care to the German prisoners of war. And while she was standing outside of a detachment, a camp, she was standing at ease. and a photographer took a picture of her. And because of the way her demeanor, it kind of depicted the unbreakable spirit of the African-American soldier. And so that image of her was put on a poster, and it was circulated all across the country to recruit African-Americans into the military. And so we're very proud of her. She's a Hattiesburg native. And then as we move on to the Vietnam, well, I guess I'll say the Korean War later, because that'll go with one of my other questions, answers to one of my other questions. But in the Vietnam War, we had Milton Olive, which was an African-American. And African-Americans have been, show as much bravery as any other race, very courageous, committed, with integrity. And Milton Olive, he was a soldier serving during the Vietnam War. He actually threw himself on a hand grenade to save fellow soldiers. He was actually the first African-American to be awarded the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War.
I love that you included women in your history there. Just fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you, Vanessa. How about you, JP? I know you've researched and got a lot of history in your work as an author.
Yes, and actually, Vanessa took one of my main female characters that I wrote a story about, and that was Cathay Williams. I just love her story, especially being a female in the military as well, that she had to go through that much in order to be in the military. And I kind of understand it. I get it. It was, it was at the end of slavery. They were recruiting the Black men to form the colored army. And, it was an opportunity that she just, she couldn't pass just because. And so I love the fact that, that she stepped up and went in, even though there were things, and I can't remember the lady's name, that was in the the Revolutionary War, similar situation, but only she was a white soldier that went in, a white lady that went in, changed her name, became a man. She got out and she was able to get disability. Cathay Williams applied for compensation, but she never got it. So when she got out, she basically went back home with nothing. So that was one of my main stories. That one hasn't been picked up by a publisher yet, but I would love for young people to hear her story.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to promote it, because this is fantastic.
Well, speaking of your stories, JP, you've written a whole series of books on careers in the military. Why do you think it's important to share information about careers in the U.S. military with young readers? What do you hope to accomplish with that series?
That's a good question, Holland. When I went in the military, it was probably a surprise to me and a surprise to my family and the recruiter as well. I had graduated from college, and my dad is a minister. We were living in Gaffney, South Carolina, and I couldn't find a job. Of course, this was in March. March Madness was on, and all the commercials that came on was be all you can be, aim high, So I said, I think I'll join the military. No one in my family, other than my grandfather, was a World War II veteran. No one else in my family had ever joined the military. So I went and I took the ASVAB, came back. My recruiter told me what my scores were and what jobs there were available. I knew nothing about them. I just knew civil engineering, but I'm thinking civil engineering, this job where I'll be, drawing building plans, things of that nature, But I chose recreation. That was a good one. My degree was in recreation administration from Tennessee State University. So it all, that meshed out. But I was one of the fortunate ones. I had many people that came in that did not know or did not understand what their career field was. So I was really glad when the publisher came to me and asked me to write this series, because I wanted young people to be informed about the career fields that they were going into. And I think that makes the whole experience of being in the military a whole lot better. If you go into a job and you don't like it because it was one where you fit in with a score, and then Two, it was something totally, and sometimes the recruiters were responsible for not telling the young students exactly what the job was about. But I think it makes the experience in the military so much better when you go in knowing what you are doing. And I wanted to write about career fields, not just your everyday security police and the career fields that they hear about. And so I went to great lengths to find career fields that the young people didn't know about. And then even also if a young person reads this series, they may not be interested in going into the military, but every job that is in the military is also in their community. So it may be a job about research in the science or professional book that someone learns that they can be a biochemist or somebody may never have thought about being a mortician. And you think, well, a mortician in the military? Yes, there are morticians in the military. Or just any number of it's maybe like 20 different career fields that I talk about. But those career fields are also in the civilian community as well as on base. So they can also become informed about a study of college or what they would like to major in or what they would like to, the career field that they would like to be in. So the main thing that I wanted to do is just let them have a little advantage by knowing what they're going into when they join the military.
That's important. And, I can see that about how the ASVAB just puts you in that narrow band of careers and that may or may not suit you, but that's just what you tested into. That can be hard on some new recruits, I know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Holland, for people who have no idea what you just said, what is that narrow band? Is that a test?
Well, JP can probably explain it better than I, what the ASVAB is and what it does for you.
An ASVAB is it's a standardized test for the military, enlisted particularly. So those people that don't necessarily have a trade, or in my case, I already had a college degree, but I wasn't going through officer training school. I was going enlisted with the hopes of transferring into the officers' ranks once I got in. So you have to take a standardized test, probably. The best way to equate it to a person that doesn't know would be almost like taking the ACT or the SAT, but okay. Only it's more career oriented. And so it just finds, the things that you like to do. And I'm not quite sure, it's been ages since I took the test, but if there may be questions that would, have you lean more towards carpentry or HVAC, and I can't remember how they word them, or medical field. And so once you get a score, whatever the high scores that you get on that ASVAB test, your recruiter will come back to you and say, you scored 89 in mechanical. So these are the career fields that you can go into. And so at that point, you have to select from that.
Okay. Well, that makes so much sense. Thank you so much for describing that a little bit. Again, not coming from that background, and many of our listeners are just listening to these going, how could these stories that JP has written be so helpful? Well, now we know how that can really support somebody who's interested in that field. I love that. Vanessa, you talked about being a consummate educator, that being something that you enjoy doing. So when other educators or anyone else in the world of teaching young people talk about stories of heroes and military heroes, celebrated leaders, what do we get right and what could we improve?
I think we do well in telling them per se, who the person is. For example, one that comes to mind very quick because I had a conversation with my 17-year-old was about Dr. Martin Luther King, and that's what they primarily been taught. And they will at least learn about him in their history classes. But even that, he's a celebrated individual, but we don't really humanize them enough to make them relatable to the young people. And I think that's one of the things that we can improve on is making them, humanizing them more and making them relatable and letting them know that, they had struggles, some of the same struggles that young people are having today. They had those same struggles. And as they struggled and overcame, so can they.
I love that. JP, do you have something you can jump in with?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we can improve upon is telling the stories accurately and timely. One of the things I can't even remember how old I was, maybe like college, when I learned about the Tuskegee Airmen and their record in the military, and the same with the Harlem Hellfighters. It's like, why does it take so long for us to put this type history out of these individuals that have done some marvelous things to make this country the great country and the free country that it is? So I think that the accurateness and the timeliness in when we share that information about African-American heroes and sheroes in the military.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I know that it's for some stories, whether they're National Secrets Act or there's some sort of privacy, we can't tell certain things about a specific thing. But I do love these points about humanizing, tell them accurately, and have them be told timely. And we really need more of them. I mean, that bottom line, the volume just needs to be increased.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said just a minute ago, Vanessa, about how we're telling people stories. How do you keep a story about a leader from becoming just a hagiography, something that the person actually was a skilled human being, but by the time you're done with the book, they're like a flawless saint? How do we keep from overstating people's accomplishments? And if we do overstate them, what might be wrong with that?
Well, again, I think if we humanize, because even though they are skilled individuals, they are flawed individuals. And we all, have struggles and we overcome. We make a lot of mistakes. We don't get everything right. And I just think it's important that we share that as we educate about these leaders in the military or any other leader.
As a writer, JP, how do you avoid making the people that you write the biographies about, how do you avoid, over elevating or overstating their accomplishments and doing what we've just been talking about, showing that they're skilled but flawed people?
Exactly. And that for me, I like to bring the person to life. So I like to say that I write with the five senses, smelling, tasting, feeling, all of that. And so that entails their emotions, that entails their flaws. And so, as Vanessa said, in order to show that these people are human, we do have to show that they made mistakes along the way, and in some cases, not necessarily even sugarcoating it. It is what it is. But the bottom line is the thing that they're famous for is this thing that we're going to highlight. But it lets people know that, they don't have to be perfect because we aren't perfect.
I wonder too, if that helps, even as I think about that young person reading your book, JP, or coming through your museum, Vanessa, feel like there's hope for them. I may have messed up, but so did this person, and look where they are now. But if all the heroes and sheroes are flawless, I'm just like, I can't attest to that. There's no way I can ever get to that point. So, yeah.
Showing that people achieved their accomplishments. They didn't just have them thrust upon them, kind of. They didn't just, and to some extent, I guess people are lucky or fortunate, or, there's some role that you have no control over, but what they did have control over, they took advantage of it. And right. Yeah.
All right. So this has been almost a tease, if you will, for this conversation, because I am sitting at the end of my seat, even though I'm standing, and I can hardly just wait to hear more of these stories. But as we wrap up this first part, JP, What is an essential element we need to know to understand how to tell the stories of African American people in the military and do it well?
An essential element to me of telling the story and telling it, like I said, it's telling it accurately. And if it involves research, do the research accurately, and check sources, double check your sources so that the information that we provide to the young people is as accurate as we can find.
Okay. Love that. How about you, Vanessa? What's an essential element?
I told it just what JP said, accuracy. And that's what, especially with us being a museum, that's what we strive for is accuracy. And a lot of times, because of African Americans' history in this country, a lot of times things are left out or told inaccurately, and a lot of times on purpose. Unfortunately, it's told inaccurately on purpose.
Yeah.
So I think accuracy is a key element.
Yeah. I know in one of our earlier episodes, we had a forensic genealogist on, and I know finding that history and being able to report it well sometimes has a barrier if it has been told wrong or there haven't been records kept. And that must make it really hard sometimes to tell those stories. So I'm so thankful for you all and can't wait to hear part 2.
And while we wait for part 2, we want to say a special thanks to JP and Vanessa. This has been a wonderful conversation. Please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. You can leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to tell your friends about us. And as always, remember that you are welcome at our table.